If you think an airplane survives by never getting hit, the B-17 was built to prove the opposite. It wasn't made to dodge bullets, it was made to take them, a lot of them, and keep flying. Now, 10 seats are waiting. The engines are turning over, and 26,000 feet above the ground, a machine called the Flying Fortress is about to show you why it was nearly impossible to shoot down. In 1934, the U.S. Army Air Corps wanted a bomber that could fly farther, faster, and carry more than anything it already owned. Boeing answered with the Model 299. 4 engines, exceptional range, more speed than most bombers of its time, and so many machine guns that when it rolled onto a Seattle runway, a reporter called it a flying fortress. The name became famous before the airplane had even proved it deserved it. But only a few months later, the entire program nearly ended. During an evaluation flight in 1935, the crew forgot to release the flight control locks before takeoff. The Model 299 barely left the ground before it lost control, pitched down, and smashed into the earth. 2 men were killed. The most highly rated aircraft in the competition was eliminated because of a single human mistake. The production contract went to Douglas. On paper, the Flying Fortress was dead before the war had even begun. But the Army knew the Model 299 was far ahead of its competitors. Using a gap in the rules, it ordered 13 aircraft for further testing. The Flying Fortress should have disappeared after its first crash. Instead, it survived long enough to reach the greatest war in history. And what made the B-17 a legend was not its speed or the weight of its bomb load. It was its ability to survive. Above 26,000 feet, the first enemy was not Germany. It was the sky itself. A few minutes without oxygen could knock a man unconscious. Temperatures could fall below minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Beyond a thin aluminum skin waited anti-aircraft fire and enemy fighters. 10 men climbed aboard a B-17 every morning. No one believed they could avoid every bullet, not even the engineers who designed the airplane. So instead of trying to build a bomber that could never be hit, they built one that could keep flying after it had been hit. Its internal structure spread loads across the airframe, so damage to one section did not automatically tear it apart. The 4 engines followed the same philosophy. Lose one, and the B-17 could keep going. Lose another, and it would fall behind the formation, but still had a chance of seeing England again. Fire was one of the greatest dangers. A bullet that found a fuel tank at the wrong moment could turn the bomber into a fireball. To reduce that risk, the B-17 used self-sealing fuel tanks. When a round punched through, special material inside the tank expanded around the hole, helping slow the escaping fuel. Sometimes, a few inches of material stood between a crew coming home and 10 empty chairs in the mess hall that night. The Flying Fortress did more than absorb punishment. On the B-17G, 13 heavy machine guns covered nearly every approach. When several fortresses flew close together, their fields of fire overlapped. A German pilot was charging into the firepower of an entire formation. But there was one moment when the B-17 had to turn itself into a target, the bomb run. The Norden bomb sight connected to the autopilot and held the aircraft straight for accuracy. No turning, no diving, no evasive action. Not even when flak was bursting directly ahead. To complete its mission, the B-17 had to fly straight into the most dangerous point in the sky. On February 1, 1943, a B-17 named All-American collided with a German fighter near its tail. The impact nearly severed the entire rear section. Anyone looking at it would have expected the bomber to break in half, but it did not fall. All-American flew more than 190 miles and landed with its crew aboard. The Flying Fortress did not always survive, but when it did, it often survived in ways no one thought an airplane could, and every mile home felt borrowed from the enemy. In 1942, the first American B-17 arrived at airfields across eastern England. Most were barely 22. Months earlier, many had been in classrooms, on farms, or in towns they had never expected to leave. Now they woke before dawn and walked into briefing rooms. A curtain covered the map of Europe. When it was pulled aside, a red string appeared, stretching from England to the day's target. If it stopped near the French coast, the room could still breathe. If it ran deep into Germany, everyone went quiet. The longer the string, the shorter their chances of coming home. After the briefing, they layered up, checked their oxygen masks, and climbed into an airplane as cold as a freezer. Dozens of B-17 lifted into darkness and assembled among the clouds. A 1943 study of several units found that only about 1/4 of crewmen survived long enough to complete 25 missions. They did not need a report to understand the number. They saw it in empty bunks. 10 men might eat breakfast together. By dinner, some of the chairs might have no one left to fill them. And the next morning, when their names appeared on the mission board, they put their flight gear back on and climbed aboard. Not because they were unafraid, because the airplane beside them was already taking off. On October 14, 1943, the curtain in the briefing room was pulled aside again. The red string ran deep into Germany and stopped at Schweinfurt. The city was a major center of German ball bearing production. Those small parts kept aircraft engines, tanks, and much of the Nazi war machine moving. American planners believed that destroying Schweinfurt could slow Hitler's entire war machine. 291 B-17 took off. P-47 Thunderbolts escorted them during the first part of the mission, but near the German border, the fighters had to turn back because they lacked the fuel to continue. From that moment on, the Flying Fortresses were alone. The Germans had been waiting for exactly that moment. Fighters appeared ahead of the formation. Instead of attacking from behind, they came straight in from the front. At closing speeds greater than 600 miles per hour, each German pilot had only seconds to fire before the bombers flashed past. One B-17 caught fire. A second fell out of formation. A third began slipping behind. The survivors tightened formation because breaking away was almost a death sentence. Gunners fired until their barrels glowed and shell casings covered the floor. Still, the formation pushed forward. Then Schweinfurt appeared below. The fighters pulled away. The flak began. Now came the worst part. To use the Norden bomb site, the formation had to hold a straight course. No turning, no diving, no evasive action. Not even while anti-aircraft shells were exploding at their exact altitude. Every black burst outside the window marked a shell that had already exploded. The next one could open inside the cockpit. Then the bomb bay doors opened. Hundreds of bombs dropped away. The target was hit. But the battle was only half over. On the way back, German fighters returned and hunted the damaged aircraft. Some B-17s had lost 2 engines, others had lost hydraulic systems. Some barely had a tail left. A few made it across the English Channel and landed in the first open field their pilots could find. 60 B-17 never returned. 17 more were damaged beyond repair. More than 600 crewmen were killed, wounded, missing, or captured. The day became known as Black Thursday. Worse, German ball bearing production fell by only about 10% and recovered quickly. 60 fortresses had vanished, but Hitler's war machine kept running. Schweinfurt proved a truth no one wanted to admit. No bomber, no matter how tough, could fight its way alone for hundreds of miles through a sky filled with enemy fighters. The B-17 had done exactly what it was designed to do: take punishment, keep flying, and bring many damaged crews home. But Schweinfurt forced the Americans to change something even more important than the airplane. They had to change how they controlled the sky. Schweinfurt did not end the war. It ended an illusion. The Americans understood that the B-17 could survive extraordinary damage, but it could not cross Germany alone. The fortress did not need to change. The way it was protected did. In early 1944, the P-51 Mustang took over the long-range escort role. With its Merlin engine and external tanks, it could escort B-17s deep into Germany and back. For the first time, the flying fortresses were no longer abandoned halfway to the target. The balance began to shift. Mustang pilots also swept ahead, attacking German fighters as they took off and forcing the Luftwaffe into constant combat. The Germans still fostering hard, but every battle cost them experienced pilots they could not replace fast enough. By the middle of 1944, the sky over Europe no longer belonged to them. B-17s were still hit. Crews were still lost. But more men began completing 25 missions, something that had once seemed nearly impossible. By the end of the war in 1945, thousands of B-17 had helped wear down German industry, transportation, and ear power. The Flying Fortress did not win the war by itself. It did not need more guns. It needed a fighter that could stay beside it all the way to the target. After the war, most B-17 were scrapped. More than 12,000 had been built, but today, only a handful can still fly. Whenever one starts its 4 engines, crowds still fall silent. Not because it is fast or carries a massive bomb load. Later bombers surpassed it. People come to see a machine built around one simple purpose: bringing 10 men home. The B-17 did not survive because it was invincible. It survived because Boeing's engineers